I never imagined my own son would destroy everything I spent my life building. My name is Walter Hayes. I'm 68 years old, and for more than 40 years, I worked the same land. My father left me a 200-acre farm outside a small Texas town. That farm wasn't just property. It was my blood, my sweat, my entire identity. Every fence post, every tractor mark in, the dirt, every barn beam carried a memory. My wife, Martha, used to say the farm kept our family together. After she passed away 3 years ago, it became the only thing I had left. Then came the accident. It happened early one rainy morning. I was repairing a broken section of fencing near the north pasture when the ladder slipped in the mud. I fell nearly 15 feet and shattered my hip and several ribs. The pain was unbearable. I remember lying there in the rain, unable to move, staring at the gray sky, while wondering if that was how my life would end. My son Daniel found me nearly 2 hours later and rushed me to the hospital. The doctors told me recovery would take months. At my age, they said healing would not come easy. Most days I was trapped in a hospital bed staring at white walls while machines beeped around me. For the first time in my life, I could not work, could not walk properly, and could not protect the land I loved. During the first week, Daniel visited often. He handled paperwork, paid bills, and kept assuring me that he was taking care of the farm while I recovered. I trusted him completely because he was my only son. Even though Daniel had always hated farm life and dreamed about moving to the city, I believed he would still protect what generations of our family had built. Every time he sat beside my bed, he acted concerned and responsible. Looking back now, I realize he was not helping me. He was waiting for the perfect moment to take everything from me. As the weeks passed, his visits became shorter and less frequent. Sometimes he claimed he was busy meeting investors. Other times he blamed lawyers, bank appointments, or problems with the property taxes. Something about his behavior started feeling wrong, but I ignored the feeling because I never thought my own blood could betray me. Then one afternoon, an old family friend named Earl came to visit me at the hospital. The expression on his face told me something terrible had happened before he even spoke. He sat quietly beside my bed for several seconds before finally revealing the truth that shattered my world. While I was recovering in that hospital bed, Daniel had secretly sold my farm behind my back. At first, I thought Earl must have been mistaken. I told him there was no way Daniel could sell the property because the farm was legally mine. But Earl explained that construction crews had already started surveying sections of the land. Bulldozers had arrived near the southern fields, and developers were planning to turn the property into a massive commercial site filled with warehouses and retail buildings. My hands started shaking as Earl handed me copies of legal documents carrying what looked like my signature. Daniel had used my medical condition, forged paperwork, and manipulated the situation while I was too weak to stop him. In that moment, the pain in my chest felt worse than every injury from the accident. The farm my father left me was being stolen, and the person responsible was my own son. After Earl left the hospital room, I sat there in complete silence, staring at those documents for nearly an hour. My hands would not stop shaking. Every page carried signatures that looked like mine, but I knew I had never agreed to sell the farm. Daniel had somehow managed to use my condition against me while I was heavily medicated and unable to think clearly. The doctors and nurses walked in and out of the room, but I barely noticed them. All I could think about was the land my father spent his entire life protecting. Generations of my family had worked that soil, and now strangers were preparing to destroy it while I lay helpless in a hospital bed. The following week felt like a nightmare that would not end. Daniel finally came to visit again, acting calm as if nothing had happened. But this time, I looked at him differently. I no longer saw my son sitting beside me. I saw a man capable of betraying his own father for money. He spoke about business opportunities, rising property values, and how the farm was outdated and no longer profitable. Listening to him felt like listening to a complete stranger. Everything he said sounded cold and calculated, as though memories, family history, and loyalty meant absolutely nothing to him anymore. After being discharged from the hospital, I returned home hoping part of the story had been exaggerated. But the moment I drove onto the property, I realized the damage was already beginning. Survey flags covered sections of the fields where Martha and I once planted crops. Together, heavy machinery stood parked near the barns, and construction workers walked around carrying blueprints like they already owned the place. My wife's old flower garden had been crushed by truck tires, and several large oak trees were marked with bright paint for removal. Standing there with my cane in my hand, I felt like a stranger on my own land. I spent the next several days digging through paperwork and trying to understand how Daniel managed to pull this off. That was when I discovered he had been planning this for months. He had contacted developers long before my accident ever happened. He met with lawyers, investors, and real estate agents behind my back while pretending to help me manage the farm. The accident simply gave him the opportunity he needed. While I was lying in pain and struggling to recover, he was finalizing deals and negotiating prices for the property that meant more to me than my own life. The deeper I investigated, the angrier I became. Daniel had already spent a large portion of the money before the deal was even fully completed. He bought expensive cars, rented a luxury apartment in Dallas, and started surrounding himself with wealthy businessmen who treated him like some rising entrepreneur. Meanwhile, I could barely walk across my own porch without pain shooting through my body. The son I raised with hard work and honest values had transformed into someone driven entirely by greed. But Daniel made one mistake. He assumed I was too old, too weak, and too broken to fight back. A few days later, Earl drove me into town to meet an attorney named Margaret Sloan, a woman known for handling complicated property fraud cases. She carefully reviewed every document connected to the sale and quickly noticed serious problems. Several signatures appeared inconsistent. Important pages had been rushed through while I was under heavy medication, and witnesses connected to the transaction had direct financial ties to Daniel. Margaret looked me straight in the eye and told me something I had almost forgotten. The fight for my farm was not over yet. The moment I hired Margaret Sloan, everything started changing. Unlike me, she was not emotional about the situation. She looked at the case like a battlefield, and Daniel had already left too many footprints behind. Within days, Margaret uncovered evidence showing the sale had been rushed through while I was under strong medication in the hospital. Several signatures did not fully match my official records, and important legal steps had been skipped entirely. The deeper she investigated, the uglier the truth became. Daniel had not acted alone. A few greedy businessmen and careless officials had helped push the deal through because they expected millions once the land was developed. While Margaret built the case, I returned to farm every day despite the pain in my body. Walking across that property felt different now. Survey stakes covered the fields, bulldozers sat parked near the barns, and workers moved around like vultures waiting for permission to destroy everything. Every sound machinery felt like a knife cutting through my chest. The old barn where Daniel used to play as a child had already been marked for demolition. Martha's garden was gone completely, buried under tire tracks and dirt. Sometimes I stood there for hours remembering the life we once had before greed poisoned everything. Meanwhile, Daniel was enjoying his new life in the city. Word spread quickly around town about his expensive apartment, luxury cars, and flashy business meetings. People who once respected our family now whisper behind my back with pity in their voices. Some blamed Daniel. Others blamed me for trusting him too much. But none of them understood how painful it was to watch your own child destroy the family legacy for money. The betrayal hurt more than the accident ever did. A few weeks later, Margaret called me with news that changed everything. One of the development company's former employees had agreed to cooperate after learning about the investigation. The man admitted Daniel pressured several people to speed up paperwork while I was hospitalized. He also revealed that Daniel bragged openly about finally getting rid of the worthless farm and turning it into fast cash. Hearing those words felt like being stabbed in the heart. That farm was never worthless to me. It carried generations of sacrifice, memories, and hard work. But to Daniel, it was nothing more than a business deal. As the investigation became public, the situation around Daniel started falling apart. Local newspapers picked up the story and exposed details about the fraudulent sale. Community members became furious after learning how the land had been taken from an injured old man recovering in the hospital. Protesters gathered outside construction offices demanding the project be stopped. Investors grew nervous, and several business partners quietly pulled away from Daniel to protect their own reputations. The same people celebrating him weeks earlier now avoided being seen beside him. For the first time since the betrayal began, I saw fear in Daniel's eyes, and I realized something important. My son thought money made him powerful, but he forgot that greed always leaves evidence behind. By the time the case finally reached court, Daniel looked nothing like the confident man who had once walked into my hospital room pretending to care about me. The expensive suits, luxury, cars, and business deals had all started disappearing around him. Investors backed away from the project. Construction on the farm stopped completely, and several people connected to the sale were already facing investigations. What Daniel thought would make him rich had slowly become the reason his entire life was collapsing. The courtroom was silent the day Margaret presented the evidence. Medical records proved I had been heavily medicated during critical moments when the documents were signed. Handwriting experts testified that multiple signatures had been forged or altered. Witnesses connected to the development company admitted they ignored suspicious paperwork because they were promised large profits once construction began. Piece by piece, the truth came out in front of everyone. Daniel had manipulated the system while I was injured and unable to defend myself. He did not inherit the farm honestly. He tried to steal it. I sat there listening quietly while my own son avoided looking at me. At some point during the trial, I stopped feeling anger and started feeling disappointment instead. I remembered teaching him how to ride horses across those same fields he tried to sell. I remembered helping him fix tractors when he was younger and believing one day he would protect the land after I was gone. Somewhere along the way, he stopped valuing family, loyalty, and hard work. Money became the only thing he cared about, and in chasing it, he destroyed himself. The judge eventually ruled the sale fraudulent and ordered the transfer of the farm reversed. Immediately, the development project was canceled, and criminal charges were recommended against several people involved in the scheme, including Daniel. The moment the decision was announced, I closed my eyes and felt a weight lift from my chest that I had carried since the accident. After months of fear, humiliation, and betrayal, the farm was finally mine again. But the victory did not feel the way I expected. A few days later, I walked alone across the property during sunset. The fields were quiet again. Those scars from the construction remained scattered across the land. Broken fences, damaged soil, and tire marks still covered parts of the farm. I stood beside Martha's destroyed garden and realized some things could never fully be repaired. The farm survived, but my relationship with my son did not. Daniel tried contacting me several times after the trial ended, but I never answered. Some betrayals cut too deeply to forgive. Blood may create family, but loyalty is what keeps a family together. Daniel chose greed over his own father, and in the end, he lost everything he tried so hard to gain. As for me, I stayed on the farm. Every morning, I still walked those fields slowly with my cane, watching the sun rise over the land. My father once trusted me to protect. The work is harder now, and the silence feels heavier than before, but one truth remains clear in my mind. The people who betray you for money usually end up paying a price far greater than they ever expected.